So I'm doing this one without a tripod. I don't know who to blame. We want to grow Jerusalem artichokes in a planter box out front of the house, 13 inches deep, plus some extra space for the legs, 10.5 to 11 inches wide. So it seems that planter boxes sell for an insane amount of money if you try to buy them at the big box store. I think we can do a little bit better. I picked up a little wood at the hardware store. I began by laying out and cross-cutting the approximate dimensions. This I think I can get 4 of each rail out of a 2x6. I decided to just sort of 13 inches plus some. It's not critical how tall this is. This is my 10.5 inch piece. I added a little extra to that because I'm not sure where we're going to land with the joinery, so I cut it 11.5 inches and we'll see. Okay, my next step was to rip down all of those 2x6s. Worked out about an inch and call it a quarter, and I was left with just a little hair off the end. That was good because sometimes the saw decided it wanted to bind up a little bit, while it was really the wood deciding it wanted to catch on the saw because the internal stresses are what they are. Anyway, that's one potential benefit of not using a super-powered industrial saw. Okay, after a little while playing with the dado stack, I figured out a way to make a suitable three-dimensional joint. And one of the things I've decided is that I'll have a lot easier time. This will be the vertical leg, right? I'll have a lot easier time if these things are square instead of rectangular. And if everything is square and lined up properly, I'll have a nice three-dimensional half-lat cross miter joint. So I milled out the leg posts with the dado stack, set this to about, 2 inches and maybe half an inch from the end. Okay, I've got the regular blade back in the saw and cleaned up a little bit. Here I'm getting prepared to square up the legs. If you'll recall, they were 1.5 inches from the original 2x6 by 1.25 inches because that's what I cut them down to. So on this side we have the markings that were on the original piece, and I'm just going to go ahead and cut those off, leaving 1.25 inches. Well, I'm beginning to mock up the frame here. So now everything's laid out and numbered so that I'll be able to tell what goes to what momentarily. And what else I've done is draw lines on all the pieces wherever I'm going to need to put a groove. In the absence of a more normal dado style throat plate, I've sort of rigged up this bit here, and you can see I've been playing with the test piece again to get where I want my grooves to be. This is just about exactly 1/4 inch deep, and I've worked out where I need to have the fence to get in the center of the short side, and also to get in the center of the long side. Time for the next step. Well, now I have all the parts milled out that I'm going to need. The grooves 3/8 inches wide and 1/4 inch deep. I have 2 grooves in the long members for across the bottom, and only 1 groove in the long member across the top. All of the short side members have a single groove. Let me just point out, from this point to this point, plus 2 grooves minus 1/16 inch is the length of the vertical slats I'll need. I begin by cutting a bunch of slabs out of that 2x6 that are as long as I need the slats to be. I've ripped them in half the long way because they'll be much easier to resaw that way. And I got the width adequate to just fit in that groove with just enough room to slide as necessary. That's enough resawing for one day. I'll get back to this tomorrow. So that's one entire 2x6 worth of slats cut. those and these over here, I'll use this trick learned from laying tile to figure out exactly how much to cut off. That mark is the right width for these two guys to trade places. It seems sensible to get both sets of end caps glued up. I'm not using any clamps. The nails on the ends should be plenty sufficient. I've taken a moment to dry fit the end panels onto the ends of the rails. Some of the rails aren't perfectly straight, so when I get to this area, I'm going to be forcing this wood out a little bit. Okay, so right now I've got this corner and this corner gluing up, and I'm just going to let those dry. So it looks like I'm going to build the sides in stages. I added just a little bit of glue to this portion and another piece of wood, so this way if any glue leaks out the top here, it'll be okay. That end is just a dry fit. 2 short walls and 1 long wall put up. Next step is going to be to do the floor. To that end, I'll need to cut some shorter slats. I've cut these 2 slabs to about double the length of the short dimension on the floor of the planter box because a single length would be too short to rip safely. Alright, here it is ripped down the middle, ready to be resawn. Parts are milled up for the bottom. I'm going to commit an act of heresy and apply a glue line all along the bottom. The reason this is an act of heresy is because we have cross grain going on. The reason I don't think it's going to make any difference is because that's done to prevent wood from cracking, but this is already effectively cracked every couple inches, so it shouldn't make any difference. All the floorboards are now in place. The planter box is starting to come together well. There were a couple of lessons learned with respect to this rail right here. One of the grooves wasn't quite deep enough in every case. I believe that's attributable to the curve in the wood. If you can't get straight wood, at least use some sort of a hold down or a feather board to make sure that your grooves are consistently deep. With any luck, that's the last of the cutting. And it's going to be interesting to get that last rail put in. I'm beginning to get things wedged into place. I've got a ways to go. Over here you can see the little problem I have. I managed to get everything lined up and then realized I need about another little bit of wood. I did have to make another slat. So let's see if this one would fit. This one would fit just about perfectly. Except that now I have to take this out again without breaking things. Oh, bad news. The crown of the leg broke off when I was slipping this into its joint. Things must have been just slightly too long in there too. I've just sort of worked that top rail loose a little bit and applied a line of glue in there, just for a few of these. And if I have glue on top and bottom of some of the rails. And there we have it. So I'll just let the glue dry, give it a coat of Danish oil to protect the wood, and call it done.
If you like this video, why don't you click the thumbs up button to let YouTube's algorithms know how you feel. Better yet, subscribe to my channel. I'd also really appreciate any feedback and discussion in the comments area below.